I am delighted to introduce our speaker today. Ricky DeFoe is a pipe carrier and sweat lodge keeper and a member of the Fond du Lac Band of Superior, Chippewa. He currently works as a language and curriculum specialist within Fond du Lac Reservation's Ojibwe Language Revitalization Program and serves on the board of WaterLegacy. Over the years, he has served on many committees and commissions to advance the opportunities for Indigenous and peoples of all colors and ages in his own region as well as internationally. His volunteer work has helped preserve and educate others about the Ojibwe language in many centers, jails, hospitals, and hospices in the community. We thank him for his service in so many and varied ways that benefit all of us, including the U.S. Army, National Guard. It is my honor to welcome him here to talk with us today. Welcome, Mr. DeFoe.
Thank you. Nashkioa Kimani Tuminan Inga Gwejima Chiwiduko Wadoma Sanungam Wani Ekadoyan Niwitajindam Bangige Go Sa Anishinaabe King Anishinaabe Jitwanan Anishinaabe Jichigang Oma Akoe Asema Ke Anishinaabe Anishinaabe Apne Ego Ogaganuna Manito Dibishku Manungum Ha Manito Kishe Manito Shoeni Ma Shin Minoa Widukawshin Chekwe Ko Nendamoyano Manungum Megwa Ungo Nijibi Matazig Gaji Bizendao Yek Miguch Kinamanek Ego Gimijian Nishnaben Bimataziwin Oki Jigakae Manito Anamika Gaginoa Minawadash Ricky DeFoe Indiji Gikenimiko Shaganashimo. Welcome, good morning to you all. I'm really glad to be here. I'm honored to be here. And I'm certainly glad that you have taken time out of your life and your moment to be here in circle. I've been asked to sound out some ways of thought. But before I do that, I want to acknowledge those mysteries that are in the four quarters of the universe, the sky, the grandfathers, our Mother Earth, the grandmothers. We acknowledge those ones, and we have much gratitude for the life that we've been given in this moment that we got together. So this is our center of the universe, our center of the cosmos. And we hear much talk about where are we in that, and what part are we part of the balance, part of the harmony, or are we part of some things that throw things in chaos? Those are some questions we need to ask ourselves. But for us as Indigenous peoples, and myself as an Anishinaabe man, I had to understand that the language that we're using now is an immigrant language. It's a foreign language. It's a settler language. And we strive to revitalize and reclaim Indigenous language, particularly Anishinaabe Moan, Ojibwe Moan, to understand the world through that language, an Indigenous language. And Wewin is something that reverberates and echoes through the atmosphere, through the cosmos. So we want to return to that understanding and way of communicating with those that are all around. We often think about the problems that are inherent in the world that we've been born into. This world is a very violent world, a very xenophobic, sexist world. So we find troubles in this world that we've been born into. We have no say over this when we first come in, but we have influence and we have relationships. So we want to build upon those, and we recognize some things that are working and some things that are not working. And for me, as an Ojibwe man here on Fond du Lac, which is a French word, our way of describing is Nagajuanam, the place where the current stops, a place on a river. So we have that connection in a worldview. So I want to talk a little bit about a cosmology, the way we see the world and our worldview. Cosmologies are deeply rooted, symbolically expressed understandings of humanness, and they predate all other forms of human expression, including religious, social, and political orders. Indigenous worldviews or perceptions of this world and our relationship within are centered around the cycles of nature, the behavior of the animals, the growth of the plants, and all things that are interrelated within that. This here determines our culture and our way of living. A true democracy when all things are interrelated, interwoven, that we are dependent upon others. This exceptionalism and way of seeing ourselves as this cosmos is man-centric is a problem. And also, first I want to sound out some things about our way of seeing the world. We know that things to be whole, we have to include the unseen. We talk about the moon and the far side of the moon we're not able to see, but we know it's there, so we have to include the unseen. We have limits to what we can see by our senses. So in Ojibwe, we talk about a manisawin, beyond those senses because of those limitations. And so it is with spirit and physical to include the unseen when we do things. So the unseen includes Chimanitu, Gije Manitu Aking, this place where the great mysteries abide. We cannot see those, but we know they're there. We're amongst them now when we are here. And then we come to see some things. We see the star world and all of the galaxies and things that we're able to see nowadays. We come a little bit closer to our Mother Earth, and then we're able to see the sun. In our language, Gi Mishu Misanan, yours and mine, grandfather. And then we see, as time, natural law progresses, we see the moon rise and set. Debiki Gi Zis Nuka Misanan, our grandmother. And those two control the seasons that we have. And then we sit upon our Mother Earth. A concept of a Mother Earth was troublesome for the ones that came from afar to these lands. These concepts of seeing something as we belong to this earth. The earth does not belong to us, that she is the source of life. not a resource. So we understand there are orders of things that come to be on our Mother Earth. We know that the Rock Nation, the mountains, were here first. An English way of seeing rocks as inanimate, that they do not have spirit in things. We see how the rock moves across the deserts, and we have evidence of that movement, but yet we don't believe. Indigenous peoples, Asanig, the Rock Nation, is alive. So it is that we see these things that were here first, the Rock Nation, the mountains and things, they give the stability to Anishinaabe people, Indigenous, the first peoples. And then next came the seedlings, the grasses, the bushes, the trees, and they give us the oxygen, life. And then next was placed here was the animals, the flyers, the walkers, the swimmers, the crawlers, and all others, so that we have brotherhood. And those things were placed here first. Last was Anishinaabe. In our language, Anishinaabe. We were placed here, we were lowered here. Nowhere in our oral histories or traditions does it talk about coming across the Bering Strait. It talks about not only the creation story, but the migration story to be here where the food grows on water.
10
So
minutes.
these things compel us to center ourselves in this cosmos. So we can't live without those, but they can live without us. So it is in this way. I think that it's important to remember in Indigenous cosmology also that we have kinship ties, which are very important to how do we center ourselves and how do we relate to those ones. So both to the living and to the dead, because there are places to remember those ancestors of ours and the importance of them, the ones that gave us the teaching. And there's also dwelling places where that we can be and listen to those in those divine moments, those dwelling places. And it's very important to see that worldview and that cosmology. The problem is that you and I have been socialized into a worldview that's dysfunctional and unsustainable. And it shapes the modern human's perception of the world as material rather than spiritual. This paradigm, if you will, has three pieces to it. A dominion over all things. We've heard that before. We have dominion, meaning dominance over all things. Anishinaabe live by natural law and spiritual law. It is only when man-made law comes that we have the problems. So we have a concept, we have a worldview that says dominion over all things. Then there's a hierarchy of life, where in this country we have man at the top and the woman is below the man. And then the black man is at the bottom and all things are at the bottom. We've seen the great chain of being and how the hierarchy of life is in this country that we've been socialized into and indoctrinated into. Also, we have in that root paradigm is a male transcendent God. In our language, we don't know if the great mystery is male or female. And I asked that question before of the scholars in other religions, and they said, no, we defer to the great mystery as a man. So I asked, is that in that deference, is that where the oppression comes to women in this country that we live in and which is dominating the global world. So that is unsustainable. This lifestyle that stems from that worldview as a source, rather than a source of life, but a resource that we can have dominion over those things, really becomes a problem, because in our society we look to those that have the monies and things as our aspiration, and we know that the elite lifestyle is full of decadence and the debauchery. It's filled with that debauchery in the way of carrying oneself, and this despicable avarice, this greed for wealth is unsustainable. And those things need to be understood, because the current trajectory that we're on will push us over the edge, because we know that for life to be, we've got to have earth, wind, fire, and water. All of those things are being polluted now with the current lifestyle and the current ways of dealing with our Mother Earth. So I think with a kinship, a closer kinship, to understand that we come from our mother and we'll return to our mother, that because we have that, not only a generational, not only a community, not only tribal, but we also have those responsibilities to nurture and care for the spirit of our mother. So these things are generational and indigenous way of seeing that world. So that's why we protect those things that are critical for life, for all peoples, not just Anishinaabe, the original peoples, but for all peoples, even the ones that have unjust enrichment in a system that is oppressive. So we have to realize that you and I have been colonized. We're born into a world that's racist, and we're born into a cosmology. And all of those institutions that we have today are based on that cosmology that's dysfunctional. So you have your cosmology, you have your philosophy, you have your values, and you have your actions that follow those values. Those are your institutions. And we see now that they're detrimental to and very dangerous to humanity and to life. So recognition is the first thing, that we're all colonized. Recognition that your mind, my mind, is colonized. And how do we free ourselves from that colonization? And do we recognize what is our hindrance to that recognition? And we know that privilege is one of those hindrances. So how do we re-spiritualize something that's despiritualized? Those are the challenges. So I think it's important to recenter each of us in our in your cosmology, our cosmology. So we say as Indigenous peoples to think alike, that we see this common homeland of all peoples, that it's in peril. Listen to the mother. She's crying of all the pillaging and the damaging that's happening, the destruction. And so that takes quietness, to be in quiet moments, to hear those things, to free yourself of the noise, the politics that happen, that unjust privileges and unjust enrichments that come because of the politics. Free yourself from that noise. Be with Mother Nature, because nature and culture are actual realities. This anthropogenic economic exchanges that we find ourselves in today is an illusion. This will not bring happiness or wellness for your children or grandchildren. We have to recognize these things for what they are. Mother Nature is a healer. We have ways of smudging naturally in the rain, in the wind. We know that the fire cleanses. We know that the earth cleanses. So go near to those places. And that's why we hold water is critical to life. So I just wanted to share a few of those things with you today. And I want to thank each of you for being here, taking time out of your precious life to be here with us and to hear these humble words. It's important that we as Indigenous people protect our intellectual properties, but it's also important that we get that out to the masses so that we can together, we have a way of changing the collective psychosis that's going on in this world today. And it's loving people like you and others that can make this happen and have the influence today. So thank you for hearing me this morning.